The Roman Republic was not built on kings or divine rulers, but on fear of tyranny and shared control. After expelling their last king, Romans vowed never to allow absolute power to rise again. Power was deliberately divided, limited, and slowed to prevent any one man from dominating the state. The Republic's survival depended on balance, competition, and constant tension between institutions. No single office ruled Rome. Instead, authority was fragmented across councils, magistrates, and assemblies. Each political role existed to restrain another, creating a system designed to resist ambition. At the center stood the Senate, an elite body guiding policy through tradition rather than law. Though technically advisory, the Senate's influence shaped nearly every major decision in Rome. Magistrates executed laws, commanded armies, and governed cities, but only for brief terms. Annual elections ensured power rotated constantly, preventing long-term control by individuals. Two consuls ruled together, each holding equal authority and the power to veto the other. This forced cooperation ensured no consul could act alone without facing immediate resistance. Lower magistrates managed finances, courts, and public order, each constrained by specific limits. Assemblies of citizens voted on laws, elected officials, and legitimized political authority. Yet participation favored wealth, reinforcing elite dominance beneath the appearance of popular rule. Class divisions defined politics, creating tension between patricians and the broader plebeian population. Early conflicts forced reforms that expanded rights while preserving the republic's core structure. Tribunes were created to protect common citizens, armed with veto power against elite abuse. Their bodies were declared sacred, making any harm against them a crime against the state. Law replaced personal rule, binding citizens and leaders alike to shared legal constraints. Written laws reduced arbitrary justice, limiting elite power through publicly known standards. Yet law also reinforced hierarchy, preserving privilege under the guise of order and fairness. Rome valued stability over equality, prioritizing control even when reform demanded sacrifice. This system thrived on rivalry, negotiation, and distrust, turning conflict into governance. For centuries, these constraints kept Rome powerful, without surrendering to a single ruler. Military command posed the greatest danger to republican balance, so it was deliberately limited by law. Consuls commanded armies, but only for short terms approved through established political institutions. Extended military command required special approval, preventing generals from building permanent loyalty. Victories brought prestige and influence, yet triumphs were granted carefully to avoid glorifying individuals. Generals were expected to surrender command immediately after campaigns and return to civilian status. Rome avoided standing armies, relying instead on temporary citizen soldiers called to service. This reduced the risk of professional forces becoming loyal to commanders rather than the republic itself. Military success enhanced political careers, but also triggered suspicion among rival elite factions. Ambition was tolerated only when constrained by law, tradition, and institutional resistance. Elite competition fueled expansion, yet internal checks restrained outright domination by any one figure. Political careers followed a rigid sequence that limited rapid advancement and concentrated authority. Age requirements and experience thresholds slowed ambition through enforced progression over time. Public service was expected, but excessive ambition was viewed as a threat to republican stability. Corruption existed, yet exposure carried severe reputational consequences within elite Roman society. Political legitimacy depended on reputation, ancestry, and adherence to deeply held republican norms. Informal customs carried as much authority as law, shaping behavior through expectation and social pressure. Breaking tradition invited backlash, even when actions technically complied with written law. This reliance on norms made the system resilient, but vulnerable when those norms weakened. As Rome expanded, governing distant territories strained republican political mechanisms. Provincial commands increased wealth disparities, fueling resentment and unchecked personal ambition. Spoils of conquest enriched elites, widening the gap between Rome's social classes. Economic inequality distorted political competition and undermined civic participation. Land concentration displaced citizens, weakening the republic's social and military foundations. The system endured mounting pressure, but its internal balance grew increasingly fragile. Expansion tested a framework designed for a city-state, not a sprawling empire. As inequality deepened, reformers emerged demanding change to preserve the republic's stability. The Gracchi brothers attempted land reform to restore citizen farmers and rebalance political power. Their proposals challenged elite interests and shattered long-standing norms of political compromise. Violence entered Roman politics as reformers were killed by rivals defending established privilege. This marked a turning point where force replaced tradition as a tool of political resolution. Popular leaders began appealing directly to the masses rather than working within elite consensus. Political loyalty shifted from institutions toward individuals promising protection or reform. Military reforms allowed landless citizens to serve, tying soldiers' futures to their commanders. Armies became personal instruments, loyal to generals who provided pay, land, and security. This transformation weakened civilian oversight and altered Rome's political equilibrium permanently. Rival commanders competed for dominance, destabilizing the Republic's system of shared authority. Civil wars erupted as political disputes escalated into armed confrontations between Roman factions. Emergency powers were granted repeatedly, normalizing extraordinary authority in times of crisis. Dictatorships became temporary solutions that gradually eroded Republican safeguards. Legal boundaries blurred as necessity justified actions once considered unthinkable. Institutions designed to restrain ambition now depended on ambitious individuals for survival. Public faith in Republican processes declined as violence became an accepted political outcome. Order was maintained through force rather than consent, undermining the Republic's legitimacy. The Senate struggled to control events at once, guided through precedent and negotiation. Tradition lost power as survival overshadowed constitutional restraint. Political stability became impossible without decisive leadership and centralized command. Reform and reaction accelerated simultaneously, tearing the republic from within. The system still functioned, but its foundations were critically compromised. Rome stood powerful abroad, yet dangerously unstable at its political core. The Republic entered a final phase where order depended on individual authority. Julius Caesar emerged as a charismatic general whose popularity alarmed elites guarding Republican norms. Crossing the Rubicon signaled defiance, making civil war inevitable and breaking constitutional restraint. Caesar centralized authority to restore order, arguing stability required decisive, singular leadership. His dictatorship promised reform and peace, yet concentrated power dismantled Republican balances. Assassination followed, driven by fear that monarchy had replaced shared governance forever. Instead of restoring order, Caesar's death unleashed further chaos and renewed civil conflict. Power fragmented as rival leaders mobilized armies, claiming legitimacy through force. Octavian skillfully combined legal authority, propaganda, and military loyalty to dominate rivals. He preserved republican forms, while quietly absorbing power into a single controlling figure. The Senate survived in appearance, but real authority shifted permanently to the princeps. Checks and balances faded as stability was prioritized over competition and political freedom. The Republic's mechanisms could not contain ambition once violence normalized political success. Order returned, but at the cost of collective rule and meaningful civic participation. Rome traded uncertainty for stability, accepting centralized power as the price of peace. What began as safeguards against tyranny ultimately enabled it under extraordinary conditions. The Republic collapsed, not from weakness alone, but from systems unable to adapt. Its laws restrained citizens, yet failed to restrain leaders wielding military power. Control without flexibility proved fragile, when ambition exploited institutional rigidity. The Republic's end reshaped Roman governance and redefined authority for centuries. From compromise to command, Rome's experiment in shared power reached its conclusion. The Republic story warns how order can undermine itself when preservation outweighs reform. Balance once protected Rome, but imbalance followed when power concentrated unchecked. Systems built to prevent kings inadvertently paved the path toward imperial rule. Rome's republic fell slowly, eroded by success, expansion, and unrestrained ambition. Its collapse remains a lesson in how power reshapes systems meant to contain it ultimately. The Roman Republic shows how systems built to limit power can collapse when stability is valued over reform. Its legacy reminds us that order alone cannot preserve freedom without adaptability and shared restraint. And Rome's experiment in collective governance remains to this day one of history's most influential political lessons. If you enjoy exploring history beyond the myths, consider subscribing for more documentaries like this. And as always, thank you for watching.